Hi everyone, it's Agnieszka Murdoch from 5 Minute Language. Welcome to my channel. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already and give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. So today's video is another one in the series of Is X language difficult to learn? So I've made similar videos about other languages including French, Spanish, German and so on. So make sure you check them out as well. So today we're going to talk about Polish, which many people think is a very difficult language to learn, especially when you come across it for the first time. But I'm going to show you why it's possibly a difficult language to learn, but also why it's not a difficult language to learn. And then hopefully at the end you can make up your own mind and decide whether or not you want to learn it. So first I'm going to talk about the kind of relatively difficult aspects of Polish. So you can say that Polish is a difficult language to learn if it's the first language that you've ever attempted. So imagine you're an English speaker and you have never learned a language before and you come across Polish and you're like, wow, this is difficult. And not having learned any foreign language before makes it quite daunting. So one thing I can compare it to is DIY. You've never done any DIY before and suddenly you have to renovate your house and you have to strip the wallpapers and paint it and do the electrical work, but you've never done it before. So what do you start with? Do you start with painting, or do you start with building furniture, or do you start with laying the carpets? It's difficult to compare which task is the easiest to do when you've never done something before. So that's why it may seem like Polish is a difficult language. If you have learned a foreign language before, you will have had some exposure to the concepts of grammar, syntax. You will know how things work in different languages. You will know that you're not supposed to be fluent after 2 months of learning. You will have a good understanding of what it involves to learn a foreign language. So Polish is certainly a difficult language to learn if it's your first language that you're learning. So reason number 2, let me just check my notes. Polish is difficult if your native language is English, because English is a relatively easy language to learn. In fact, it's probably the easiest language I've ever attempted to learn in my life. English is just quite simple. If you speak a language like Russian or Japanese or Spanish, Polish will have fewer concepts that are unfamiliar to you, because a lot of the concepts in Polish are already kind of part of these other languages, which could be described as more difficult than English. Okay, in terms of pronunciation, there are a few different sounds in Polish that make it quite difficult to learn. So I'm talking specifically about the accented letters. I'm going to call them accented letters. They have like little accents over them. So for example, there's an S with an accent, which is pronounced sh. And then there is also the letter combination SZ, like in my name, Agnieszka, which is pronounced sh. And also the letter combination SI, which is pronounced si. So you've got sh, sh, and si. They are very similar to each other, but there is a very subtle difference, and it's very important that you get the difference right if you want to pronounce things correctly. So that can be quite tricky, and there are other sounds like that as well. For example, y, j, j. They're all kind of different, separate sounds, but they sound quite similar to each other. But if you think about, for example, learning English, if you're not a native English speaker, when you were learning English, you had to learn how to pronounce, for example, the TH sound, which is th or the, in the, or this, or thought. And that's quite difficult. For me, that was really difficult to learn when I was learning English. So if you overcame that as an English learner, then I'm sure that you can learn the Polish sounds as well. Okay, so the next one is the cases in Polish. So there are 7 different cases for nouns, which is quite tricky because you have to learn different kind of variations of the same word multiple times. To give you an example to explain what I mean, when you say this is a cat, in Polish, you say to jest kot. And if you want to say I have a cat, you say mam kota. So kot and kota both mean cat in English, but they are different forms of the same noun in Polish. So you have to use a different form depending on what it is that you're trying to say, what function the noun has. So some people might think, well, that's crazy, that's just so much to learn. But when you think about English, for example, think about all the phrasal verbs. The word look can take so many different prepositions. You've got look after, look down, look up, look out, look for. There's so many different variations of the verb look that that makes it really, really difficult, actually. So the level of difficulty is maybe similar, even though the difficult aspects are slightly different in the two languages. Now, when it comes to spelling in Polish, there are some letters which sound exactly the same, but they are written differently. So, for example, in the word mountain, góra, the spelling is the sound U is an O with an accent. And in the word burza, which means storm, the sound U is just spelled as a U. And the pronunciation is exactly the same. There is actually no rule as to why they're written differently, so you have to learn it off by heart. But then in English it's the same. You've got the word right, as in on my right side, and you've got write, which is writing letters, and they are spelled completely differently, but they're pronounced the same. So is Polish really that difficult? So the next one, which is quite tricky in Polish, are the genders. So each noun has a gender, and there are 3 different genders: masculine, feminine, and neutral. And you basically have to learn what they are for each word. But that's not new. That's a concept that exists in lots of different languages. In French and Spanish, every noun has a gender, and you have to use a different article for each of them. So in Polish, actually, the vast majority of feminine nouns end in an A. So for example, like I've just said, the word góra, which is mountain, ends in an A, so it's feminine, and that's how you can remember it. Then the vast majority of neutral nouns end in an O. For example, dziecko, which is child, or jajko, which is egg. So you can remember that as well. And then the rest are probably most likely masculine. There are a few exceptions, obviously, but there are some rules that make the learning of genders much easier. Okay, now why Polish is easy to learn. It's easy to learn because everything pretty much is pronounced how it's written. So it's a very kind of phonetic language in that respect. There are no silent letters. If you learn how to pronounce each word and each sound, you will be able to know how to pronounce all Polish. Every word pretty much is stressed on the penultimate syllable. So if you remember that, you will not have any problems with stress. So in English, for example, it's more complicated because words can be stressed on different syllables and they mean different things. So, for example, construct versus construct. Or I've got another example, decrease versus decrease. And obviously the word changes meaning depending on how you stress it. In Polish, that doesn't exist. Okay, so here's another one why Polish is a really easy language to learn. Tenses are very, very simple in Polish. So in English, I think there are 16 different verb tenses. So for example, in English, you can say, I live, I am living, I have been living, I have lived. And in Polish, it's just one word, mieszkam. And you use it for all these different scenarios that I've just outlined in English. A lot of vocabulary in Polish has Latin roots. So for example, informacja, motywacja, edukacja, komunikacja, all of these words are easy to memorize because they are very similar to Latin, very similar to English and other languages in that language group. Okay, the final one, which is super useful if you're learning Polish, super useful to know, and it'll be a massive relief when you hear this, is that in Polish, word order doesn't really matter. So you can change the order of words in a sentence to a certain extent and it won't make a lot of difference to the meaning. Whereas in English, there is a set word order, like in many other languages. When I say Mary has a dog, these words have to be said in this particular order for it to mean Mary has a dog. Whereas in Polish, you could say Mary ma psa, which means Mary has a dog, but you could also say psa ma Mary. Mary has a dog, but it's a different word order, but it's still kind of like means the same thing. I mean, there are slight differences in meaning, but ultimately what I'm trying to say is that if you're not sure what the order will be and you say something as a foreign language learner, people will actually understand what you mean and it won't sound stupid at all. So finally, everything is relative. There is no easy languages, no difficult languages. Everything is relative to your own experience, your own native language, what other languages you have already learned, and your general kind of perception and learning style. So I hope you found this video useful and that you will learn Polish. Let me know if you're learning Polish in the comments below or if you have any other questions, and I'll see you next time. Bye!